Hey, good afternoon. Y'all made it through day one. We so appreciate you sticking it out and hanging out with us for the next hour. So our session today, we like long titles if you've been to any of our other sessions. So our session today is an itinerant teacher coaching model, strengthening classroom teachers' skills to support itinerant students and the general education classroom. So presenting today is myself, Jana Sanders, along with Tabitha Irizarry and Rachel Eisenberg. So we'll go ahead and get started. We're with the Center for Effective Schools. We work with all people associated with educational environments to support prevention and intervention efforts to help students be successful. Our goal today is to talk about how a coaching model can develop over time. So we're going to take you through a couple cycles of what our coaching model looked like and how it evolved through implementation feedback. And we're going to talk about the core steps of a coaching model that helps support student success, all student success, as well as students with IEP goals. And then we're going to look at this in the real world through seeing how we implemented the models. Okay, so we're first going to talk about, okay, that's mirroring. I'm just making sure. So we're first going to talk about why would we coach? So, first and foremost, Octo tells us and recommends coaching as a way for professionals to continue developing and implementing evidence-based practices with the children they serve. So we know that teachers or any professional, school psychologists, school counselors, any of us, we get degrees and we have experiences in education, but we want to continue to refine and grow our skills as we're implementing them in our professions. And so coaching is a great way to do that in the real world because coaching is our bridge. So coaching helps take the knowledge and skills we learn either in our own educational programming or in trainings we attend or PDs, and it helps bridge those knowledge and skills into implementation. And so we're gonna look at the coaching bridge today, specifically between a special education itinerant teacher and a general education classroom teacher. But as you all know, coaching can look different in different areas. You can have peer-to-peer coaching, an external consultant coming in to coach, or that itinerant teacher, classroom teacher coach. But the goal is that we build this positive relationship where we're helping to build specialized skills and give each other knowledge to serve our students and our population the best that we can. So coaching effectiveness, just a little bit of background as to kind of why we recommend coaching, why we've used coaching. It can help support or can help promote self-reflection in our professionals. We're thinking about what we're doing, we're refining our skills, and it can help refine the strategies that we use. So maybe we're great at praise, but we have a coach come and teach us how to do behavior-specific praise, and it really, as I like to say, supercharges our praise statements. And so not only can it help us think about our practices, but it can help us identify areas of growth for our practices. So we can also consider the effectiveness of our current practices. I love that. I think this ties in really well to the keynote. We can be thinking, is what I'm doing evidence-based? Is what I'm doing helping the students that I'm looking to help? And so sometimes having somebody else, like a coach, to bounce ideas off of can really help us think about those things. And then we can make goals and we can action plan. So it helps build competencies and it's used to enhance existing practice, develop new skills. So we know that our field changes a lot, and so coaching can help if you're new in the field or you've been in the field for 20 years. Coaching can really help develop new skills and stay current, as well as promote that continued growth. So classroom teacher use of best practices for behavior support. So we know that staff pre-service training can vary, just like any profession's training can vary depending on the degree you got and the university you got it from. And then we also know that different sites have different expectations. And so we can only prep so much, right? And then we get into the real world in the real classroom with this set of students this school year. And sometimes that implementation piece we need a little extra support with. We also know that training programs don't have as many courses that are really dedicated to building classroom and behavior management skills. So coaching is a great way to help build those skills again in that real world environment, because it seems way easier to manage a classroom like on paper than it does to be in the classroom and be the only adult there and you're like, oh, this is all my responsibility to manage. And so I think that coaching is really helpful in those situations. Our goal is to be preventative. If you talk to anybody from the Center for Effective Schools, our favorite word is prevention, probably. So we really want to focus on preventative approaches and not on that reactivity that we can easily fall into, all of us, myself included. All right, so we don't want to rely too much on in-service trainings to improve skills. They're a great place to start. They're great, like today when I'm giving you this information, it's a great place to start. But we want to continue past our dotted line into supporting that real world implementation. So in the real world, staff get feedback on their practice. They can use coaching, and then we know when this happens, there is large measurable impact on classroom practices, especially when coaching is provided. So we see that in the beginning, we kind of get the information, maybe we have a discussion about it, we see an exemplar, maybe we have the opportunity to practice with a colleague, but then we want to practice and get feedback working with the student. So that is what the coaching model helps support, that we're going to talk about in a minute. So really the foundational belief for coaching and the coaching model that you're going to see today with itinerant teachers is that all students should be able to experience success in their least restrictive environment. And so we really want to support all of our students being able to stay in their least restrictive environment for as long of the day as possible, so they can get those peer-to-peer interactions and they can really benefit from that LRE. And then we want to support all teachers with being able to help their students be successful. So we don't want our general education teachers not to be able to be successful with their students that are on IEPs. So we're really supporting the teacher in the classroom to support their student with an IEP in the gen ed classroom to support that LRE. So I'm going to pass it over to Rachel, and she's going to talk about the iterative itinerant coaching model. And that's a mouthful, so here you go.
But the number of times you're going to hear me say iterative, and then there's some other similar words, I probably will trip up, but it's fine. So just by show of hands, any program-wide folks in here? I'm assuming many of you may be program-wide facilitators. Any school-wide facilitators? Okay. Anyone? How about working in a preschool setting? Working in a school-age setting? Okay, so good. All right, we have both. So we developed this, as you may have caught on, perhaps, in what we've shared, that we developed this type of a coaching model for itinerant teachers for students with special education in an early childhood setting. However, this is applicable across all settings, and we're going to talk about this development of a coaching model across years and identify how you may be able to take some of these ideas away for your development of a system like this across years. What things we learned, what were some barriers we encountered, and what can we do to try to address those barriers, and also just how long something like this might take. So let's get into this iterative development of the model. So iteration 1, there are 4 total, so I'm going to talk about the first 2. Iteration 1, we focused on classroom management skills and motivational interviewing skills. This iteration focused on building the itinerant teacher skills in classroom management and the ABCs of behavior so that they had a good foundation in these skills. These were areas identified by administrators as a need among the itinerant teachers, and it helped us to create a foundation of skills upon which those itinerant teachers could build their coaching toolbox. We also focused on building in elements of motivational interviewing, as I said, to help them feel more comfortable as coaches. They had a very limited experience in training classroom teachers. As you could imagine, an itinerant special education teacher is focused on supporting an individual student and helping the teacher help that student. But they didn't have a whole lot of experience in coaching the teacher to help the student or all the students in the classroom. So they wanted some additional support to be able to gain buy-in from the classroom teacher. The goal of this was then to keep the coaching process flexible, helping them gain buy-in, helping them to be a little bit more collaborative with the classroom teacher and not as directive. So that's our starting point. That's where we began. The classroom management training series focused on the building blocks of behavior, the ABCs of behavior, which were then aligned with strategies to prevent, to teach, and respond to behavior effectively. All of these strategies were intended to help the classroom staff implement the PBIS of the students receiving the itinerant teacher support, but the goal was to coach the teacher in these skills so everybody in the classroom would benefit. In developing the model for coaching, we gathered input from the itinerant teachers to understand how they typically interacted with the classroom staff because we wanted to start with buy-in. So we wanted to start with where they were. So the itinerant teachers identified that they spent between 50 to 75% of their time supporting the classroom teacher. I know this is super tiny to read, but that teal bar is identifying that they spend 50 to 75% of the time supporting the teacher. They also identified in the other graph, which I know you can't read, but the bars to the left indicate the amount of support that they provide, the percentage of time provided in different areas of support, and they identified that they typically supported the teacher using modeling, visuals and handouts provided to the teacher, and sharing strategies with the teacher. So we identified, sorry, let me go back a second. We identified that because they provide 50 to 75 or spend 50 to 75% of their time helping the classroom teacher, and these are the ways that they were comfortable doing it, we thought let's go with a coaching model that aligns with the things that they say they're already doing to make it match their practices. So we developed this coaching framework, or we follow this coaching framework. We didn't create this idea. This is out there, supportive behavioral supervision models, and we didn't create it, but we applied to this coaching framework. So the itinerant teacher assesses the classroom teacher's implementation of a skill, like a skill that they would need to be able to use to implement a PBSP, for example, whether it's providing praise or providing pre-corrections. So you observe their use of skills, you provide feedback to the teacher, you give the teacher a menu of options for strategies that the teacher would like to implement. And then that, because you're giving a menu of options of strategies, it builds in that motivational interviewing component, that the classroom teacher gets some say in what they want to work on. The itinerant teacher and the classroom teacher then identify which intervention to choose based on both teachers coming together and having a conversation. The teacher then self-monitors their use of the intervention and monitors integrity in that way. And then the itinerant teacher provided performance feedback to say, you said you did steps 1, 3, and 5, you missed steps 2 and 5, let's work on improving steps 2 and 5 of that skill, and giving that feedback, and then continued, and the process cycles. So here are some of the highlights of this first iteration of the coaching model, which was year 1. So itinerant teachers received initial training in the foundational skills to be coached. And they also received initial training in this coaching model. The itinerant teachers were also given autonomy in identifying the skill to be coached to help obtain teacher buy-in. So we didn't say, there were 19 itinerant teachers. We didn't say all of you need to be working on skill A. We said, here's skill A through F. You may want to work on any of them with your teacher. And again, using the teacher input and buy-in to capture buy-in. The itinerant teacher then designed the observation tool. We gave them a template, but they designed the observation tool for that skill. Again, the goal here was flexibility based on the request of the need for flexibility from the teachers. Feedback form is simple and not specific to any individual skill being coached, but there was a feedback form that the itinerant teacher could follow in giving feedback to the classroom teacher. And then we ended the year with a set of focus groups. So we had a series of 2 focus groups for itinerant teachers to give their feedback on how it went and how we could adjust and improve the coaching model for the following year. That focus group was really important. If you're thinking about developing a model within your setting, the focus group was very helpful in getting feedback in how to improve. So the takeaways then, following the focus groups, we learned that the itinerant teachers wanted to create a larger menu of skills for coaching. Initially, there weren't enough skills to pick from. They wanted a set of more detailed tools for directly doing direct observations of each skill in the classroom, and they wanted greater structure around the performance feedback piece as well. They also wanted resources available to better communicate with classroom staff and administrators in the program, and they wanted more detailed training on how to coach the classroom teachers, which led to iteration 2. So we'll call this the structured skills and feedback iteration. And in doing this, we took the feedback to heart and we created lots of resources, things they could share with the teacher, lots of observation tools, lots of feedback forms, and we stuffed that toolbox. So here's how we did that. The first goal was to train itinerant teachers in the updated coaching model. Again, we made those changes to the model, so we updated that and trained them in it. And we also trained them in the updated skills for coaching that they would then coach the classroom teachers on. The second goal was to provide structured resources for coaching so the itinerant teachers wouldn't have to create anything. We just gave all of the things to them, and we provided more skill options for them to coach on. The training included a refresher training on the skills that we already had and the new skills. And also still included some motivational interviewing elements to consider teacher buy-in so that when they went into the classroom again, they would get classroom teacher buy-in. Then we trained on the updated coaching model, and we recorded the trainings for each skill so that the itinerant teachers could go back and reference the recording for how to implement that skill in the classroom and how to then, so they knew how to do it to then help the classroom teacher do it. And also there were recorded trainings on how to observe the teacher implementing that skill. These are the resources that we provided to the itinerant teachers. Of note, the screening tool was a much more detailed tool in this observation, and it allowed the itinerant teacher and the classroom teacher to work together to identify a skill for coaching, but in a much more structured way than before. Last time it was have a conversation. Now it's fill out this screening tool with me. We also had coaching meetings with the coaches each month to help walk them through the implementation of the coaching model, to guide them as they went through. And we also had a steering committee that we developed as a result of the focus groups. And the steering committee itinerant coach members helped facilitate discussion during the coaching meetings. I'm going to pause for a second on that steering committee because that was a really important component that came out of the coaching meetings, or that came out of focus groups. They identified that they needed itinerant teacher buy-in from the group of itinerant teachers, and the administrator overseeing the itinerant teachers said, I'm going to pick 3 itinerant teachers to join you in the planning process for this so that there's more of a collaborative development process. And we said, great, but let's make sure we have someone who's really bought in, number 1. Number 2 is another person, let's make sure we have someone who's like kind of on the fence and like not so sure about this, because if we have everybody in that steering committee who's so bought in, but there are some itinerant teachers who are saying, we're not doing this coaching, I'm not comfortable with it, this is new, we're not going to get any of the naysayers on board. So we need someone who's kind of on the fence about this whole thing. And then we need someone who's like super organized and can manage some of this. So the administrator brought in those 3 people and nominated them, and they were willing to participate. So we had that focus group, and the focus group helped to give us, focus group. The steering committee helped to give us some guidance as we continued to develop the model. These are the skills that we included in the second iteration. You can see they're focused on prevention primarily and some responding to behavior. This is a set of steps for the coaching model. These stars indicate the new steps that were added or heavily refined in the second iteration. I'm going to get into a little bit more detail about how we had the teachers identify the skill options, so I'll get to that in a moment. But basically we had the itinerant teacher select a classroom teacher to start this with. They started with 1 teacher the first time they had to do it. They didn't do it with all of the kids' teachers. They picked one of their students and that classroom teacher for that student. So they identified a teacher, identified options for the skill based on what the student in the special education program needed. And they said, okay, my student needs these 3 skills. This is what they really need to work on, so I need to have the teacher do those things well in the classroom when I'm not there. So they would come up with some options and then have the teacher self-screen in their use of those 3 skills and say, hey, I think I do skill 1 better, but skill 3 I'm not doing very well. And then they would action plan with the teacher and identify like, okay, well, if you're doing skill 1 really well, we don't need to coach you on it, but we might need to coach you on skill 3. And then they would do coaching, so they would use an observation tool to watch the teacher do the skill, and they would then give feedback. And then based on database decision making, we would monitor and see how's the teacher doing, and if they're doing really well, great, let's finish that up, make sure they're doing well 3 times in a row that I observe, and they can move on. If they're not doing well, what can I do to help them improve? So as far as identifying skill options and screening need, just a little more detail to explain that. So the itinerant teacher selected 3 skills based on the student's IEP needs. The itinerant teacher then gave a screening tool of those 3 skills to the classroom teacher. And so the screening tool included all the steps that the teacher needs to do to implement the skill. So for example, delivering a pre-correction, if that's the skill, there may be 7 steps to doing that. And so the classroom teacher would then have to say, well, I do this, I don't do that, I don't do this all the time, but I do that all the time. And then based on that screening tool, you would identify how well the teacher's implementing that skill all the time. So the classroom teacher would complete that for 3 skills. And then using that screening tool, the classroom teacher and the itinerant teacher sat together and identified from the 3 skills what would be the one to focus on first. And then, again, using decision rules, they would identify how to support the teacher if the teacher wasn't implementing the skill over time as desired. All right, so we received feedback from the steering committee along the way. We conducted a focus group at the end of iteration 2 with all of the itinerant teachers, and the key takeaways were that the resources that we created were helpful, but they were a lot. Again, we stuffed that toolbox. So the goal for the next iteration was to streamline all the tools for the following school year. And the itinerant teachers, as new coaches, requested in vivo support. They said, okay, we kind of get this now, but we need a little more help. Can you help us live and give us feedback on how we're doing as coaches so that they would be more comfortable? And then another goal moving forward was to standardize baseline classroom teacher skill implementation so that it would be a little easier to screen for need and identify where to coach. And I'm going to hand it off to Tabitha to talk more about the second 2 iterations.
All right. So this is a process, as you see. So we got to iteration 3, and as we saw in our goals, right, we wanted in vivo supports. Another piece that we really wanted to add in here was baseline. We talk a lot about database decision making. What are we going to do? How are we going to show that this is really working? And that was one of the pieces that we thought would be a really great addition. So again, you see a theme here. We are identifying what the most useful tools are. So we stuffed the toolbox. Now we're kind of picking them out and seeing what we can use that is most useful and helpful to our teachers. And our goals here, again, to mirror the things that came out of iteration 2 were that in vivo support and then streamlining the materials. We really wanted to get on the ground and support our itinerant teachers so that they could have that in-person support, showing them what to do, helping them through any of the challenges that they were facing. It was really important for us. Again, the biggest thing here was we wanted buy-in and we wanted them to feel supported. One of the things, if you're not in itinerant teaching, they wear a million hats and they go to a million different places in schools, and we really wanted to be able to give them that support and give them something that was not just do all of these things to support your teacher, but how can we best support you in supporting your teacher? So I think that was a really big piece with that in vivo support. So how do we streamline our resources? We categorize the skills, which we're going to look at in a minute, because we saw that was a lot of skills, right? So how can we streamline that even more so and again, give that bite-sized pieces? How are we going to use this standardized baseline tool? What does that mean? What does that look like? We'll talk about that in a little bit. And then we made one coaching form. One of the things was, we have an observation form, we have a feedback form, I give this to the teacher, I give this to you, what do I do with all of this stuff? And so we put it all in one form, and I basically said to them, send that to me however you want. You know, if you want to send it by carrier pigeon or email or scan it to me, I don't care, as long as it's easiest for you and I get your data. That's all I cared about. So that was that one coaching form. So we had our baseline, and our baseline had all of what we're calling our foundational skills here. So these were the skills that we identified as, you know, in order to even get to a place where we can touch these application skills, we need to really look at these foundational skills. Once they're mastered, then we can apply them. And that's what we really wanted to focus on. So our baseline focused on those foundational skills. And what that really looked like was us coming in, supporting those itinerant teachers with collecting that baseline and seeing where our teachers needed support. So as you see here, this is that same model. We really added in that mentoring piece. We added in that baseline piece and really working closely with that teacher to gain their confidence, boost their confidence, make sure that they knew what they were doing and getting that data, because that was the biggest piece. We were really wanting to see, okay, what are the actual skills these teachers need? And spoiler alert, there was one that was identified with almost every single teacher, which we'll get to. So the changes that we made here, again, we added in that baseline data collection, and then we also modeled coaching sessions. So I was a classroom teacher myself, and I have to admit, when a teacher would come in, or when someone else would come in and coach me on something, right, I'd be like, how about you do it first? So I wanted to make sure that our itinerant teachers felt that, like, we want you to model a coaching session. I'll come in and I'll do it to show you what I mean, right? So give you that support, not just tell you what to do, but show you what to do. Because I remember as an emotional support, special ed, itinerant, and supplemental teacher, that was a big thing for me. People constantly were coming into my classroom and telling me what to do, but not showing me. So we really wanted to kind of walk that walk with our itinerant teachers as well. So our takeaways from this iteration were that one of the things we noticed was we have a lot of different teachers. So at this point, we have 26 itinerant teachers right now, but at that time it was about 20. And there were some of those itinerant teachers who looked at me and said, Tabitha, I have been teaching as long as you've been alive. And I was like, you know what, you're right. And I really wanted to empower that and say, you know what, I want to learn from you as much as I want to be able to bring a different perspective to what you're doing. As well as some of our brand new teachers who were like, I've never stepped foot in some of these situations in my life, like what do I do, right? So there was lots of different levels of support that were needed, and by coming into the space that the itinerant teachers were in and conducting baseline for them and being so there and present, for some teachers that was amazing. For others, they were like, I got this, right? I might ask you a question behind the scenes, but I've got this. So we wanted to make sure that we respected that and also gave them that autonomy. So that was one. Sorry, that was a lot to get to one point there. But we also needed some infographics, right? This is like a meta idea here. Coaching the coach to coach the teacher. Trying to explain that to someone is really difficult, even from my perspective. So I have practiced my elevator pitch on what itinerant coaching is, but for our teachers who are going from class to school with different types of cultures and environments, that was hard to do. So sometimes coaching was getting lost in translation between what we were trying to do and what schools or our programs, because remember, we're in daycares, we're in preschools, we're in all sorts of different places, right? Some pre-K to 8 traditional schools. So we needed to make this more streamlined so that the itinerant teachers could feel confident in sharing that information. And like I said, we identified an area. In that baseline, expectations and rules was the #1 need across the board for every single teacher, except one. The other one was giving effective directions, which to me follows suit after expectations and rules, right? But every single one, which was great data, because we made a change for this iteration, knowing that expectations and rules was going to be something that we needed to focus on. And we needed easy access for coaching. So we've tried OneDrive, we've tried Teams, and I said, you know what? We're just gonna put everything on a Padlet. I'm gonna give you a nice little folder with a QR code, and you can just go and access that, and you know what? If you can't do that, just let me know. Again, we wanted to make this accessible for teachers so that we would not only get their buy-in, but that they felt successful. I didn't want this to feel like a burden to them. I wanted this to be something that was helpful to their practice and something that they could add to what they were already doing. So we made some more changes, and now we had some differentiation and communication. So again, we wanted to differentiate for those experienced teachers, make them feel like they had autonomy because they deserve that autonomy, of course, and also hold a space for teachers. Again, we have 26, so hold a space for those teachers who were brand new and really needed and wanted that extra support. And then also streamline this communication business because, look, it's hard to go into all these different places. So now we have our tools, now we're building the house. This is the foundation for what we want this to be going forward. So what did we do? What were our goals here? Differentiation of support, using those infographics to explain to stakeholders meaning general teachers, principals, program directors, parents even, right? If you went to our session before, we talked about training parents. We want everybody to have that support and buy-in to what's happening because we truly believe that this type of model is what's going to really strengthen the support for our students who are on IEPs, PBIS, but also our general education classrooms and all of our students. So we really want them to feel like they know what's going on here. And then also, materials to support them. So what did that differentiation look like? So for our novice teachers, we called them our brand new teachers, right? Brand new. They get one-on-one support this year. So that means every single step of the way, we're conducting baseline with them, we're checking in with them, we're looking at their data, we're doing all of that with them so that they feel like they can get it, right? And they feel supported. If they call me up and say, Tabitha, I do not have time to record this data this week, no problem. We'll come out and do it for you, right? We want them to feel supported. And then our early career teachers, they're like our 1 to 5, they're getting it, but we want to really support them with that database decision making because they're really great at coaching. They're really great at coaching those skills, but then what, right? When do we move on? How do we make those goals? How do we give them that bite-sized feedback? That's something we're really practicing and working on right now. So we want to focus on that. And then our experienced teachers, we said, look, we're here. We're here as you want us and need us. But we're going to let you kind of run the ship until you call us in. With all of that in mind, the teacher who has 25 years, 30 years experience, they could have support every step of the way if they wanted to. We just wanted to offer these different levels so that people could have that autonomy, but know that they could have our support when they needed it. So here, we kind of streamlined what that looked like. Everybody this year started with expectations and rules. That was, everybody's doing that. Then they're completing baseline, then they're identifying their skill, and then they're going through that coaching and feedback cycle. So that was our difference in this year, which I think, again, has been really great because now teachers don't have to wait until baseline's collected. They talk to us, we look at it together. They're just automatically going in there and starting with expectations and rules, which means that teachers are being supported quicker, which is really, really important because we want them to feel like they have that support right out of the gate. And especially with expectations and rules. What do you start the school year with, right? So we did that. We also gave them a little infographic. Here's what itinerant coaching is. Here's what the cycle looks like. Here's why we're doing it. And there's that Octel announcement, right? So that's the why. That's why we're doing this. And they can easily give this to anyone that they need to, any stakeholder. One of the other pieces was, it's hard to give feedback, especially to a peer. So these itinerant teachers, they're essentially coaching their peers. And that can be really tricky, right? That can be a sticky place to be. So we gave them some really great foundational skills in giving feedback, great ways to really look at that and break that down so that they felt comfortable. And we're always willing to meet with them and kind of help them through that process as well. We also gave them some information on how to start that conversation. What does the conversation of coaching look like? How does that play out? How does that play out with a teacher, but also how does that play out with our stakeholders? There's lots of times where I will talk to, or some of our other colleagues at the Center for Effective Schools will talk to those stakeholders like principals, our program directors to kind of explain coaching a little bit more, but we also want to empower our itinerant teachers to feel comfortable in doing that. So we have given them some resources for that as well. And like I said, as far as accessibility, here's an example, or here's a screenshot of their Padlet. We love a good Padlet at CES. It's just what we do. But honestly, it really is helpful. They can go there. All the things that they need are there. We're constantly updating it with anything else that they might need. Again, so it's a one-stop shop. This doesn't need to be hard. This should be enhancing their practice. So far, so good. People are seemingly liking this and how it's going this year, and that's really important to us. We really want that social validity piece. We want them to be invested and bought into this process, because again, this was an addition to, like, let's be real, this was an addition to their already stressful load, right? So we want this to be something that they can do and feel good about. So far people like it. The experienced teachers really appreciate that autonomy, right? I really love hearing their feedback. I have emailed a bunch of our teachers and said, like, how's it going? What feedback can you give to me? What can we do to kind of enhance this and make this work best for you and for your teachers? And honestly, it's been a wonderful, like, beautiful partnership that we've been able to establish. So I'm really glad for that. And then also it's allowing us to concentrate on our teachers who really do need that support, which has been a wonderful experience. So we like a little bit of outcomes here. So we don't have too much data to share with you, I'll be honest, because we're working on that. That is the goal. That is the goal for upcoming. But we do have some. But before we do that, I want to kind of look at these changes. So you'll notice, and this is a bunch of things, right? You can read this. There are slides that you can print to look at this. But one thing I really want to highlight, and I'm going to, right here, iteration 3. Right there, iteration 3. If you notice, that is where this really became acceptable to teachers, okay? The third iteration of this. So if you have something an initiative in your school that you're like, I know deep in my soul, right, and the data tells me that this is something that's going to help my students and help my teachers, stick with it, right? We got to iteration 3 before this was something that people really felt like they could do and really felt bought in and invested. And guess what? We still have some who are like, I have to do this again, but we're going to get them. We're going to get them. And it might take a little bit, but we're going to get them. So just please, 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 if anything you take from that, all those changes, take that. Here's what some teachers are saying. These are direct quotes. You can read them, yourselves. I trust that you can do that. But really, positive things, right? Extra eyes on the classroom, feeling supportive. It was really helpful. And sometimes it's just good to get like a second eye on things, a second opinion on things. We do that with doctors all the time, right? We get second opinions. Kind of the same thing. We're in a practice where we want to do that sometimes. So it's been really great. And then this is my favorite slide because I'm really proud of this coach. So this is one of our itinerant teachers, and she started coaching this teacher on expectations and rules. And when we started, we were at 25% of skills being met, okay? And just to give you a little heads up, that's one of our 4 items that we have for that particular skill. And she stuck with her, and she coached her, and she coached her. And you can see here, she got to 100% and was sustaining that over time, which was really great to see because that classroom was a little bit of a struggle. I'm not going to lie. I remember I went in there, I saw it myself with my own eyes, and I was like, oh, okay. But when those expectations and rules were implemented with fidelity, the way that we were coaching them, all of a sudden, the general ed teacher was like, wow, I can breathe a little bit. Like, this is getting a little bit easier. And that's what we do it for, right? Because at the end of the day, those teachers who, I don't know how they do it in those preschool classrooms, any classroom really, but I have a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old. I could not teach them. I don't know how they do it, but if we can make their lives a little bit easier through coaching and giving them these great skills, then we're really doing something. And we're really able to improve not only their practice, but the students and their lives as well. So that's something that was really cool to see. So our recommendations, right? When you're doing something like this, you're gonna have to, like, that ego, you're gonna have to, like, throw it across the room, because you're going to have to adjust all the time, right? You're going to have to be okay with changing for what works for the people who you're working with, and that's something that we really had to do with this process. You're also gonna wanna identify those core components. So this is our model. What was most important to us? What was most important to us was that we had those evidence-based skills that we knew were really effective in schools. We wanted to make sure we had a really strong observation and feedback cycle, and most importantly, of course, that we were making database decisions. So that was what was really important to us, and we wanted to build our model around that. We had tweaks, we had changes, we had things come and go, but that was the core. And so when you're doing something in an iterative development, think about what is your core? What's your core for what you're doing? And then, of course, analyze and assess and do all the things using data, right? So our next steps, and I know I got 3 more minutes, so I got this. We want us to be able to collect more data, huh? Oh, I do? Oh, just kidding, sorry guys, lucky you. Just trying to, like, hurry you up, you know? I know, it's like the last one of the day, you're probably like, okay. So, we want to be able to collect data. We want to be able to collect data on what's happening, and really, my hope and dream is that we're able to collect some student data and really look at their IEP goals, look at their PBIS goals, and is what we're doing helping them? Because that's what it's really all about, right? So that's the next goal. We want to be able to strengthen the skills in our teachers. So some of these skills are new to them. And we want to be able to strengthen their understanding so that they feel confident going in and coaching those skills. And then also we want to build those relationships. So I'd also love a world where, like, we get all of our stakeholders together and really have them collaborate and work together and learn about how we can help to support teachers and to support these students. So that would be great. I'd love to be able to collaborate more with some of these great stakeholders. And then another goal is we want sustainability, right? We always say it's great if we work ourselves out of a job, right? So we want them to be sustainable and feel confident in their processes. So we want to build up some master coaches. So who are the people in their in this particular preschool cohort of itinerant teachers who there can help and support and coach new teachers within their group, right? So that they have that autonomy, they have that buy-in already because it's not someone outside of them, right? It's someone who is working, doing the same job that they're doing day in and day out. How can we build them up so that they can coach and support their teachers that are within their cohort? So that's kind of another goal that we would like to be able to do, because at the end of the day, teachers, we want them to be able to build and do things together instead of, in their own little silos, which we all tend to do sometimes. Okay. So, I got all worried thinking I didn't have enough time, but now you guys get out of here early, so you're welcome. But this is, if you have any questions, if you want any more information, if there's anything that we can do to support you in either coaching, figuring something out in an iterative development, because that's a whole thing. Oh, I love questions, yes. Oh, great.
I love this idea, and I'm just taking it back into my head.
Yeah.
My classroom teacher, so I'm a learning support teacher, basically special ed though. I have ES, AS, I have everybody.
Oh.
Everybody from K to 2. So I work with
You're a special person.
I work with all the classroom teachers, kindergarten, first, and second. We have 3 grades, so I have 9.
Okay.
I'm just like thinking like rollout. Like I know any directives given to classroom teachers, especially when they already have a crazy class, that it's like, oh my gosh, why are you making me do this? Like I'm
Right, and that's, yeah.
What was it for like the rollout when
Yeah.
we're met with like negative classroom teachers or veteran teachers that are like, don't tell me how to do things, or I am doing that, how dare you think I'm not?
That's huge. So the question was, what do you do when you're rolling something like this out and you have teachers who are like really defensive, right? That's essentially what it is. They get defensive because I used to always say, you know, my classroom was my little space, and anyone coming in there and messing with that was hard, right? So what do you do? I think the thing so we had the advantage to really, like Rachel kind of explained, bring in teachers and get their input and opinions from the get-go. So like they essentially helped to build that first iteration of this. And that's what really got their buy-in. Coming into it from not doing that and maybe saying this is the model, I think that would be a little harder. It would be. But I think still, again, taking that ego out of it, thinking, okay, what are they able to do? What are they capable of doing? And then where are they at? Like, and really having that open dialogue with them and thinking like maybe one year, maybe the first year it's literally just like coming in and observing and seeing what is going on, right? And building it from there. I think that is the big thing with something like this. And that's what's so great about iterative development. It can happen slowly, but that's really hard. Rachel, go ahead. Please.
Because I think you're so right? Like, and everything you said is so true. So just to add to it, I think giving the classroom teacher a chance to say, like, well, these are all the things that are frustrating to me. And like, what do you mean you're coming in? Like all the things that they're overwhelmed with. And then saying, okay, well, what can I do to help with some of that? Because I have a feeling that some of the things that you would be coaching them on for your kiddos would help with the whole class, right? And so yes, there's that thread of like, well, you're not evaluating me, and what do you mean? And go talk to the supervisor. This is not a you thing. Don't do this. But if you have the administrator's support to be doing this kind of coaching, and you let them know that doing this can help the whole classroom, that may help. But what may help even more than that is to say, okay, well, what's one thing that's palatable that I can do with you? Granted, this takes a lot of time, right? It would take a lot of time and effort on your part, but maybe baby steps with like a couple teachers, and then, so you could say, like, let me do it with you, and let me do one simple thing. Like, what's one thing? Maybe praise, or praise is actually harder to implement than it sounds, right? But something simple like a teaching expectations, putting expectations up on the wall for the first step, and then, okay, well then focus on teaching them. Little baby steps that you can do with them, and baby step it across the classrooms for your sake, that can help to gain that buy-in, so that then ultimately, and that's what happened with some of the teachers here too, where they were like, oh, like, this is helping. Okay, let's do a little more. And in other coaching models that we've done more directly, not the coaching the coach of the teacher, but where we're coaching more of the coaches, we've seen that in other settings too, where it's like, okay, well, you got in there and you're working with me, and now I see some change, and now I'm more bought in. So that could help. Does that answer? Does that help?
Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
I was just, because I love it. I think it's awesome. It's just, I was like, where would I start with this?
Yeah.
Like,
And
and getting admin support, and, because I think it's like, I just went in and started like that, they'd be like, hey,
Oh, sure.
thanks, whatever.
Right.
But if I like paired with admin and like teaching them about, like, getting training on it and things like that, I think that would be easier instead of just walking into their classroom saying all this.
And I think, like, to what Rachel said, going in there as, like, I'm here to support you alongside of you is a game changer. So, like, for some of the teachers, it was, like, can you print these and laminate these rules? That extra step, that extra, like, mile to really help them and say, look, I'm in the trenches with you. I'm not here to tell you, is essentially what Rachel just said. But I think that's super helpful. Yeah.
Is there a way to access that toolkit? And what all you already have built and put into it?
Good question. So the question was, is there a way to access all of these great resources that we have developed for other schools and to do that? And I'm going to have Rachel answer that because she's our guru on that thing.
Okay, well, first of all, if you are interested in any kind of consultation and support around this, feel free to reach out to us and we can offer support in developing this kind of model and tailoring it to your setting. If you're talking about like specifically just like where are the observation tools, where are the feedback forms, we are working on building up our product line of materials like this. So right now this toolkit is like tailored to this school and it belongs to that school and we're not selling it like as its own separate thing at the moment. However, if you reach out to us, we are very close to getting the materials ready to go for like use anywhere, and it should be available soon, if that helps. But if you're interested and don't want to wait for that, reach out to us anyway and let us know. We could still offer support and yeah.
Anything else? No? I really appreciate you all being here at this last session of the day with us. I really, really do. So thank you. I think what we do here is really great, and I'm glad you got to hear about it. So if you have any more questions, you can email us.